For someone like me that's well into my 70s.
Yeah, and like me, well into my 80s.
There's obviously things that we've been doing.
That really work.
Okay, we got to stop before we start making crazy claims. What we want to talk about here is going to be the impact of glucose, high levels of glucose, high insulin, as far as it affects your age, but more importantly, like why it's important and what we can do if people are over 40.
Yes, very, very key.
I want to mention I popped a 30% off discount link down below for Thrive Market. Now, Thrive Market is an online grocery store, but it's not like a regular grocery store. It's set up by different diet categories. Okay, so you've got keto, you've got vegan, you've got paleo, you've got different diet categories. So it allows you to get the best quality foods, okay, no preservatives, no garbage. You can stock up your whole house, not just your pantry. They have sustainable meat and seafood options, so you can stock up your fridge. They're working on really cool options as well. So you're looking at just everything you can get in a store, essentially, that's gonna be in frozen or in the regular section, delivered to your doorstep. And with this link, you save 30% off your entire first grocery order plus a free $50 gift. So I've also created my fasting bundle, which is things that I recommend people get for breaking their fast and also for sustaining their eating period with the right kind of foods. So that link is in the top line of the description right below this video. I definitely recommend you check them out. They are a sponsor on this channel, but they have been for like 5 or 6 years now. And it is definitely where you want to be going as pretty much your one-stop shop, almost entirely your one-stop shop for what you can get delivered to your doorstep for your intermittent fasting routine.
I think maybe we can start by talking about glycation.
I think glycation is a great place to start.
Okay.
So you take it away on that and then I'll add some different pieces there.
Sure. So I'm gonna explain to you how high blood sugar increases this process of glycation, which is essentially aging. So first, let's take an image. Let's take a raw chicken and you put it in the oven. As it's cooking, the chicken goes from pink to brown. That process of cooking is called glycation. And in the human body, from the moment we're born, we're slowly cooking like the chicken in the oven, and we're slowly aging because glycating, cooking, and aging are very similar, okay? So the question is, we can't stop aging, right? But we can actually slow it down or speed it up. In particular, the more glucose spikes we have, so the more deregulated our glucose levels or blood sugar levels are, the faster glycation is happening, the faster we're aging. And this shows in a few areas. So number one, it shows on your skin. The more glycation is taking place in your body, the more you're gonna have wrinkles. But it also, on the inside, your organs are slowly being damaged and slowly aging. So really glycation is super, super important. And as we learn to balance our glucose levels, we can slow that down, which is why some people who are 60 look much younger or much older than other people that are 60. It's not just about your biological age, it's about what's actually happening in your body.
Yeah, and it's interesting because people look at that initially and they say, okay, well, you're telling us that carbs are bad then. Carbs are what are making us age. That's not the case at all. Aging is a very natural process, but where carbs come into play is we have to think about, dare I say, energy balance. And I'm not talking about calories from energy balance, I'm talking about carbs from energy balance too. We live in a world where we live in these constant glucose spikes with inactivity. Now, the simplest thing I could ever say, which isn't going to exactly be the sexiest thing to say, is going to be, yes, if you exercise and you bring that glucose down manually by exercising, that's the simplest thing, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what everyone can do, and that's not the way that our world is set up. So the reason I say that as a disclaimer is that we're not here to say that carbohydrates are making you age.
Yeah.
Okay, it's this gross imbalance of high levels of circulating sugar that shouldn't be so high. So when you look at glycation, especially with proteins, I always liken it to like caramelizing an onion too.
Oh, I like that.
That's because
Ooh,
it's like you're taking this onion and all of a sudden it's cooking and it's becoming sweeter and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. And
by the way, you can't uncook it.
You can't uncook it,
which is very key, right? You can't reverse glycation, but thankfully a lot of your cells that have been glycated in your body then get, replaced. But anyway,
that's the good news, is that you have this replication, you have apoptosis, you have certain things that, like, if things become so damaged, the cells can die, they can self-destruct, they can end their own life to ultimately recreate. Now, when it comes down to proteins in particular, collagen is one that gets attacked a lot. Okay, and that's the wrinkles, that's the flexibility to your skin.
The nails.
But also what
And the skin.
And
the hair.
for guys like that are really focused on, that's like our joints, that's our connective tissue.
Of course.
Right? So it's easy to think this is like how I look on the surface, but what about how you feel?
And actually collagen, there's this amazing study that was done where scientists looked at the collagen of babies and it was white, and they looked at the collagen of people who were 100 years old after they died and it was completely brown. Your collagen slowly glycates and goes from white to brown. It browns like the chicken in the oven.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the simplest method with that, when you're over the age of 40, you have things that are slowing down, okay? Cell turnover is slowing down. All of these processes that would normally, like you could be granted a little bit of amnesty when you're younger with certain foods, like you might notice, wow, it's like I hit 40, and it's like the Snickers bar that I could eat in my 20s wouldn't impact me, and now it's impacting me. Well, there's a number of different reasons why it is, but at a cellular and at a glycation level, it's impacting you more too, because you're unable to turn over faster. So what are some ways that people over 40 specifically can help combat this glycation?
So one thing that is quite interesting is, okay, we don't want to cut out carbs entirely from our life, right? I love pasta, I love chocolate cakes. So there's ways that you can eat it in a way that actually does not increase glycation as much as it would. So for example, if you want to eat something sweet, two things. Number one, always have it as dessert after a main meal instead of on an empty stomach or between meals. So as an example, if you love, I don't know, granola, or if you love cookies, or if you love watermelon, I know you love watermelon, don't have that on an empty stomach, have it after a meal. That way you'll have less of a glucose spike from that food because the meal that's already in your stomach is gonna slow down how quickly the sugar will make it to your bloodstream. So slow down that glycation. Second, another really good time to eat something sweet or just carbs in general is before you're working out or while you're working out. So another one of my hacks is after your meals, use your muscles for 10 minutes. My new favorite way to do this is by doing calf raises at your desk. So you just, sit at your desk and you just lift your calves like this. You can do it for 10 minutes. That way your muscles, your calf muscles, are going to be uptaking a bunch of that glucose without needing insulin for it. And that's going to reduce the spike in your body. So that's an easy one.
There's also an interesting, I know there's like a neurological connection with doing those soleus calf raises where it's actually triggering the brain. It's almost, in a very colloquial way of putting it, it's almost as though the brain is tricked into thinking that you're walking. So with that, it starts kind of upregulating other systems and processes, which is why I know you've talked about, Dr. Andrew Huberman's talked about it, like it's becoming this important thing. And it's like, if you're sitting at a desk, yes.
It's amazing because nobody will see it. You can do it completely quietly and it has a big impact on your glucose.
Yeah, it sounds stupid. Like it sounds absolutely ridiculous.
Well, in the study, actually, they did the calf raises for like 4 hours. You don't have to do it for that long, but even just a few minutes is going to help your body.
Well, it's interesting because it's also like this aspect of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, where you look at people there's a lot of people like myself, when I was younger, like I used to do, like you can't see my legs right now, but I where you're kind of just doing this with your like kind of bouncing your legs. Like I was always kind of fidgety, like kind of bouncing my legs. And those are people that they operate at a higher resting energy expenditure as well. But it's just a wild piece.
Interesting.
And another piece that people, I don't want to add something that's more additive. What can someone add in is if they're worried about glycation? Well, this is additive, but it's also subtractive. And what I say is practice time-restricted feeding. Okay. Now, the reason that this is very important for people over the age of 40 is there's documented bodies of research for modulating the inflammatory response of all kinds of things. So reducing inflammation. What is time-restricted feeding? I'm not asking people to intermittent fast. I'm not asking people to go 16, 18 hours. I'm asking people to practice eating in 12-hour blocks. At least take a 12-hour break. If you stop eating at 7 p.m., don't eat until 7 a.m. Why is this? Okay, well, there are processes in our body called autophagy. There are processes in our body that actually allow for cellular recycling and insulin and glucose modulation. And these all have to happen in the absence of food. And we are so conditioned to constantly be eating that...
snacking is actually a 90s invention. People didn't used to snack before.
Wild.
And then all these food products came up like the perfect snack. It's like, you don't need to do that.
Yeah. Consolidated meals. I usually tell people it's like, just go the old school 3 square meals. Like, because people here, if we jump to the weight loss side, people think, oh, well, I was told I need to constantly be eating to increase my metabolic rate. That couldn't be further from the truth. The thermic effect of food is very minuscule. Like you only see like a 1 to 2% elevation in your resting energy expenditure. You get significantly more just by drinking water.
Wow.
So that is totally wrong. The amount of insulin spikes and glucose spikes that people get by snacking, and you're never giving your body a chance to come down.
To go into fat burning mode as well,
Well, yes, absolutely, fat burning mode, but also just what I would say, again, colloquially, is like a cellular recycling
Yeah,
mode.
just rest for your body so it can do the stuff it needs to do so it can clean up. Yeah.
You nailed it. It's that
Yeah.
cleanup.
Yeah.
And because the interesting thing about us is we cannot reverse glycation, but we can allow cells to go through their natural sort of apoptosis, through their autophagy,
Yeah.
and go through what they need to do to sort of recycle over time. And you
Absolutely.
need a break from food to do that.
Another thing we can talk about on the topic of, slowing down aging when you're over 40 is about sleep, actually. I want to talk about sleep because the more glucose spikes you have in your diet, especially at dinner time, the less restful and the less deep your sleep is going to be. So really around dinner, I have another hack that's quite helpful for people, which is add a vegetable starter to your dinner. So add a plate of veggies at the beginning of your dinner, right, as a starter. And this should make up about 30% of your meal. And as you do this, the fiber from the veggies, when it arrives first into your stomach and then into your upper intestine, it's gonna create this like protective mesh, this protective gel on the walls of your upper intestine and prevent your body from absorbing too many glucose molecules coming down afterwards. That's a really easy way to reduce the glucose spike of your dinner so that your sleep is more restful, because sleep and aging are like this, right?
Yeah, and that's a great thing, because if you look at, if you're over 40, you probably have a decent social life. You want to maybe eat with friends, you want to go out to eat, and you've got this beautiful plate of food in front of you, and people don't realize that the simple order in which you eat your food can make such a big impact. And talk about something that you don't even need to change anything about your life.
Yeah.
You just, when you look at a plate, you've got veggies, you've got protein, you've got your fats, you've got your starches, you've got these different things. And if you can learn to analyze and understand the different components and not just wolf it all down.
So the studies show us that if you change the order, you can reduce the glucose spike by up to 75% without changing what you're eating. And again, the right order is veggies first because of that protective mesh that fiber creates. And then it's proteins and fats, also slows down digestion. And then last are the carbs and the sugars. And so the food order can be a little bit like overwhelming to really separate things out, and that's why I focus on the veggie starter, because that's really where the most power lies, and it's a bit easier to think, okay, I'm just going to add a plate of veggies at the beginning rather than separating out, all of your chicken from your rice from your things. So I mean, depends on how motivated you are, but think about this. Think veggies first and carbs last.
Yeah, well, and you can also think of your carbs as your dessert, like whether they're sweet or not. It's like if I'm going to have a plate of food and I've got mashed potatoes on it, I don't have mashed potatoes often, so I want to save it for last. And that's the way that I kind of.
And another big one, when you're at the restaurant and they serve bread, they give you bread while you're ordering, don't have it. That's the trick. Have it after your main, right? Do not start with the carbs, with the bread, because that's going to create a bigger spike.
That's a very good point. Now, there's something that happens as we get older that are called damage-associated molecular patterns, or also commonly known as DAMP in the scientific community. And what these are is essentially, as we get older, we have it's called inflammaging is what it's been coined as, right? And it's this inflammation that naturally occurs with aging as a result of mitochondria being dysfunction and DNA being damaged, and essentially it's creating, our DNA is getting broken, which is a natural thing as we get older, and it's kind of sad, but it essentially is leaking particles that become inflammatory and trigger an immune response. So we have a low-grade inflammation that's always
against
happening.
our own body, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So we have this low-grade inflammation, essentially just fighting our own body as we get older. And that is one of the reasons why they're starting to understand why joint pain starts to creep up on you as you get older, and these certain things. So I also want to, when we're talking about glucose, we talk about, okay, over 40, what are things that we can also do that might impact inflammation? Now, one of the leading things that we talk about here a lot is the effect of sugar on inflammation.
Yeah.
So being able to control sugar, being able to control those glucose spikes can in turn modulate that inflammatory response.
Absolutely. And with every glucose spike, especially when they come from sweet foods because of the fructose in there, right? With every glucose spike, you're increasing inflammation in your body. And in the world right now, 3 out of 5 people are going to die of an inflammation-based disease. Yeah. So inflammation is a big deal, and we have to think about how to reduce it. And again, when it comes to looking at this through the angle of your blood sugar, there are these simple things you can do, like having a savory breakfast instead of a sweet one, having the veggie starter, moving after eating, that are additive, and you'll start feeling the effects quite quickly, especially if maybe you're over 40 and you've feel a bit like your energy is a little bit sluggish, maybe you have some pains and stuff. These are easy things you can do to help your body thrive and do better even as you age.
Yeah, well, it's such an interesting point because on my channel, I talk to a lot of people that have adopted a ketogenic diet or they've adopted carnivore. And it's interesting because they say, okay, well, I feel so good. And they ask me, is it because of what I'm eating or is it because of what I'm not eating?
Yeah.
And more often than not, suffice it to say, as someone that is a huge proponent of keto, and I'm quite a proponent for, if people want to do carnivore, it's not for me, but if people want to do carnivore and it feels great for them, that's great. But I also encourage them to look deep inside and be like, is it the absence of these huge spikes in glucose that you're having?
And it's possible, and that's why you can see benefits from people going on all sorts of diets, because often all the diets have in common that you take away processed foods and you reduce sugars, right? And that might actually be the connective link, well, one of the connective links that are so helpful when you adopt any kind of new diets. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that's an interesting thing to look at. And it's interesting because, people get so upset, like the paleos versus the ketos versus the whatever. And actually, like, guys, we're all kind of talking about the same thing, which is just don't eat processed foods and don't eat sugar, and we're gonna be good,
And we're all on the same team.
Exactly, we're all on the same team trying to help people. And so the glucose hacks I share, which are all science-backed, you can apply them to your life, whatever your diet is, which is also why it's so nice and helpful and cohesive.
What would you say the most important time for someone to pay attention to their blood sugar is?
Like time in life?
Well, no,
or time of the day.
Time of day.
Every time and all the time in life. The morning, breakfast. Yeah. Because if you have a big glucose spike at breakfast, that spike is then going to deregulate your glucose for the rest of the day. And that might cause what a lot of people term sugar addiction. You might hear somebody said, I'm addicted to sugar, I need to eat sugar every couple of hours, that's just who I am. It's like, well, no, you might actually be causing that with the breakfast you're having. So in my book, The Glucose Goddess Method, my new book, I give 30 different amazing breakfast recipes that help you start your day without a glucose spike. Because often if you think, okay, what do I have to eat for breakfast? Like eggs, like that's a bit boring, right?
Yeah.
So I give people a lot of different avenues and things to test out that are delicious, but also keep your glucose level steady. And if your whole life you've been having the same breakfast and it was a sweet or starchy breakfast, so like oats with bananas, cereal, fruit juices, when you switch to savory, your entire experience of your day changes because your energy is much more steady. You're not having that cravings roller coaster, and really like you feel more like yourself. For me, it was such a big shift in just my brain health, my clarity, my energy, really my purpose also, because I was like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel.
Yeah. Have you heard of something called NST neurons before?
No, tell me everything.
Okay, so what you're explaining sounds so much like this. NST neurons are in the hindbrain. They're in a portion of our brain. And it's interesting when you talk about savory because there's a different element of salt that a lot of us forget. Like if you look at livestock and you put them, if you put what's called a salt lick, a big brick of salt into a 100-acre pasture, the livestock are going to find that salt. Okay, because it is just this absolute biological need. We need salt. There's no getting around that, right? So we will find salt. And what's interesting is there's a gustatory response that when we consume salt, it actually activates these NST neurons, and these NST neurons are what also regulate sweet cravings. So it's a very simple way of putting it. It's quite complex, but basically, a lot of times when we're craving sweet things, when we have salt, it can pacify that sweet craving. And we used to think, oh, this is purely like just psychological, it's just like a psychosomatic thing where it's like, oh, we just eat some salt and it makes us not crave sugar. But now with this NST kind of like region, this hindbrain region, we're actually seeing that salt can curb these sweet cravings. So when you start the day with salt, you might think you're craving something sweet, so you want to reach for something sweet, but you have a little bit of salt. And it's crazy. It's all of a sudden you don't crave something sweet anymore.
That's so cool.
So it's it still needs it's still in rodent model research, right? So I can't say 100% this is going to happen, but I challenge you to try it because I've tried it. It's like I crave something sweet. I have like a little bit of salty electrolytes or something, and it's like, you know what? Psychosomatic or not,
try that. That's very
it's
interesting.
doing something, right?
That's interesting.
So starting the day with that like saltier breakfast, and also you mentioned when we talk about the brain, dopamine, like. We respond to fats, we respond to sugars, we respond to salt, all in different ways with our neurotransmitters. And when you combine those together, it's overload, right? Yeah. And a lot of times, like if you have some fat and you have some salt, you're satisfying 2 of those 3 dopamine hits without the blood sugar spike.
Yeah.
So yes, you're still addicted to food. I mean, I say that with quotes because yes, we have to make make sure that's clear that yes, you're still turning to food as an alternative to satisfy something.
Yeah.
But at least you're doing so without the potential glycation and without the blood sugar spike that goes with it.
So with less aging, and again, if you're over 40 and that's one of your focuses, you want to, extend your health span. So as you age a number of years, you don't want your body to age too much and you want to stay in good health for a long time. You can slow down the biological aging processes. And one of the places to start really is to flatten your glucose curves and reduce those blood sugar spikes. That, to me, steadying your glucose levels is almost like the foundation in your house. Like, it's really important to start there. Then you can layer on a bunch of other stuff. But if that's not okay, it's going to be really hard for your body to thrive. Like, it's really the base, the core of health, physical and mental.
Yeah, it's like thermodynamics, calories in, calories out. Of course, that still matters as simple energy balance, but what good is that if your foundation is crumbling?
Yeah.
Right?
And also you can eat the same number of calories and you can eat 2,000 calories a day, but in one way you can have a lot of glucose spikes if you're eating just starches and sugars, and on the other way you can be eating 2,000 calories and keep your glucose levels steady. And your body will experience those two diets or those two ways of eating very differently. And your brain will experience those very differently. You'll have a much better time if your glucose levels are steady than if they're spiking all the time.
Awesome. Well, Jessie, where can everyone find you?
So my new book, The Glucose Goddess Method, is out now, and it's really your fast track to steady glucose levels. So it teaches you over the span of 4 weeks, 4 hacks to put in place. Super easy. You just have to lean back, relax, follow my lead. Amazingly simple recipes, fewer than 6 ingredients, and it's just a gorgeous book. And I actually tested this method, this Glucose Goddess Method, on 2,700 people from all over the world, all kinds of ages, but you have amazing results. Like 90% of people have fewer cravings, 80% of people have more energy after these 4 weeks, right? That are just additive. 40% of people sleep better. I mean, the results are astonishing. It doesn't ask you to get rid of anything in your life. It's really like adding these gentle giants in place so you feel good, you slow down aging, and you steady your glucose levels.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And also you're mad on Instagram, like you've got all kinds of stuff there,
Glucose
super
Goddess.
helpful. So you can find all that stuff's linked down below, her books down below, everything. Jessie,
Thanks for
thank you so
having me,
much.
man. It was so good to see you.